Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is J.J. Graham. I'm the president of the Heritage Chapter at FTVA, Freedom to Vigilance Association. I want to be your host this afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the ribbon cutting ceremony for this amazing EC-47 Airborne Direction Finding, or ARDF, history exhibit. Please silence all cell phones and pagers as the ceremony is about to begin, if you haven't done so already. And any other magical electronic devices you might have that make noise, please make them noiseless. Going outside. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the arrival of the official party, the singing of the national anthem, and the invocation. Commander, 17th Training Wing, Colonel Jimberly Jose. ARDF Operator and ARDF Exhibit Coordinator, Chief Master Sergeant Tom Nuri, United States Air Force retired. And ARDF Operator and Researcher for this exhibit, Mr. Joe Morton. Sergeant Cox.
Broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Jeff Bonsack, would you please come forward and offer the invocation?
Good afternoon. I did want to make a moment of personal privilege as before we enter this time of prayer that I'm proud to say that my father, Major Rich Bonsack, United States Air Force retired, was an EC-47 aircraft commander from 1972 to 1973. He flew out of Da Nang, Vietnam. And my parents have been to Goodfellow many times during my assignment here. And my dad always enjoys seeing this beautiful EC-47 parked in front of the Norma Brown building. And as a very proud son, I am honored and grateful to participate in today's dedication ceremony. Will you join me in a time for prayer? Gracious God, we gather this afternoon to dedicate this exhibit honoring the 6994th Security Squadron's Airborne Radio Direction Finding Mission. This exhibit is dedicated to the airmen who trained at Goodfellow for this critical mission over the skies of Southeast Asia. We also dedicate this incredible exhibit to the airmen of today and tomorrow. The stories told by this exhibit serves as a constant reminder of what can be done, even with a 30-year-old airframe. We assemble today to celebrate and remember those airmen who for so many years are often only known as Mr. X, Mr. Y, or Mr. Z. And we are grateful that after many years, some of their stories can be told to their children and grandchildren, today's airmen, and even the pilots and co-pilots of those EC-47s. On this beautiful day, we also pause to remember. We remember those airmen who flew the ARDF mission that gave the last full measure for their nation. They are remembered. This exhibit lets us honor their memory and sacrifice daily. Almighty God, we are grateful for the many ways Goodfellow Air Force Base celebrates its history. On this day, we add one more chapter to our story. And we thank you for the incredible efforts of Chief Master Sergeant Thomas Muir and his team and everything they did to make this exhibit happen. We give thanks for the many ways this exhibit will inspire members of every branch of service. And as our dedication ceremony begins, we remember the three words which best describe the valiant efforts of the ARDF mission specialists: unarmed, alone, unafraid. Loving God, hear our prayers this day as you hear them all the days of our lives. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Thank you, Tech Sergeant Cox, for that wonderful rendition of the National Anthem and Chaplain Bonsack. Today, we're honored to have with us several distinguished guests, and I do mean several. Representing the Director of Staff, Air Force Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance Agency, Mr. Gabe Marshall. Vice Commander, 17th Training Wing, Colonel T.J. Hamrick. Commander, 17th Training Group, Colonel Michael Grunwald and his wife, Heidi. Dr. John Garrett, Wing Historian, Exhibit Point of Contact for Goodfellow, and his wife, Judy. Mr. Ed Bedinelli, who flew 240 EC-47 missions during 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. Mr. Paul Clever and Mrs. Nita Clever. Paul is the son of the late Tech Sergeant Lewis Clever, killed when the EC-47 he was flying on, Cap 72, was downed by enemy fire over Laos on 5 November 1969. Paul and Nita located the crash site in 2012 and recovered many of the artifacts we have on display here today. Thank you for being here. Mr. Ray Lefwitz Jr. and his wife Kitty. Ray's father, Tech Sergeant Raymond Lefwitz Sr., was killed when his EC-47, Tide 86, was shot down on 9 March 1967. This was the first EC-47 lost to enemy fire in Vietnam. Ray, what? Mr. J.C. Wheeler and his wife Glenda, EC-47 flight engineer, author, and mastermind of the EC-47 history site. J.C. is a walking book of knowledge on EC-47. Nice to have you here, sir. Known as one of the first EC-47 go-to guys who flew missions 1967 and 1966, 1967, Mr. Richard Myers and his wife Jan. We would also like to send a warm welcome to all others in attendance today. We appreciate you for joining us, especially the members of the Nuri family. Without you, this exhibit wouldn't have come to fruition, and we appreciate your efforts. Thank you for your service. And back to Chaplain Bonsack. I don't know if you realize how amazing that coincidence is. His father flew EC-47s in Vietnam. His father was assigned to the 17th Bombardment Wing. The chaplain's duty assignment is the 17th Training Wing, his first duty assignment, and here he is at EC-47 dedication today. So it's a real privilege and an honor to have you here today, sir. Thank you very much. And I can't wait till your father gets here. The EC-47 ARDF flights were crucial to our military successes in Vietnam. While I was not privileged enough to be part of these missions, I can tell you that many of those brave souls that partook in those missions are with us here today. And we appreciate you folks being here. We appreciate your service to our country, and we salute each and every one of you. Thank you again for being here. Today we also have the honor of having a few of those folks who are responsible for this exhibit here to speak with us today. Our first speaker will be Chief Master Sergeant Tom Nuri, United States Air Force retired. This exhibit has been a labor of love for a lot of people, but completing this exhibit was a personal mission for Tom. It is because of his pursuit of this dream, with the dedicated support of his family, that we are standing here today. Tom was stationed at Nakhon Phanom Royal Thai Air Base, aka NKP, aka the end of the world, from 1970 to 1971, and he flew 141 missions on the EC-47. It was Tom who came up with the idea of historical display, and he followed through, as he always does, this time with the help of a lot of people in the audience today. Ladies and gentlemen, Chief Master Sergeant Tom Nuri, United States Air Force retired.
Thanks, Chief JJ. I'm going to take a minute just to arrange things here because historically I work long hours on a script, and then when I get in front and I see all of the interested faces and I think of all of the things that I need to say, I just throw the damn thing away. So to make sure I get the protocol part right, bear with me as I get started. And the first thing that I want to do is say thank you to the Air Force, and that's represented by the 17th Wing Commander, Colonel Jose. She got here, a year ago, May, and when she came, we were well along in this process, the thought process anyway, and we welcomed her on board, and she did a smooth transition. She was interested, even camouflaged a bit of excitement, I think, and that carried on, and it motivated us, and as we worked the project, it came full circle that day that we were putting it together, and Colonel Jose walked through here, and she stopped, and I watched her look at all of the names up there, and she was previously the commander of the 373rd Intelligence Surveillance Reconnaissance Group and the community security center at Massawa. A bunch of intel pukes, but our biggest unit. And over the years, quite a number of our ARDF guys had an assignment at Massawa. And in respect to them, the folks at Massawa had done memorializations there. And there are 9 of the 17 ARDF flyers that have been memorialized at Massawa. And I saw Colonel Jose go up there and look at the names, Clever, Connor, Dorsey, Gott, Land, Matijov, McNeil, Reese, Ryan, and you look around for the rest of the names, and there's 5 of them already here at Goodfellow, with a 6th to come in October. Colonel, we couldn't think of anyone we'd better have than you to come help us cut the ribbon. You're one of us, and we appreciate you. Doc Garrett, there were 2 huge groups involved in this. All the so sly and devious retired chiefs over here on one side, and the United States Air Force on the other side. And in the middle, I guess Doc and I stood, probably a bottleneck on either side. But Doc was the one that kept it alive, made presentations on our behalf. And as we were communicating in email, one day I told him to just keep pushing, and he answered back and he said, Semper Sisyphus. So take that, because poor Sisyphus had to push that boulder up the mountain, and he came down again, and he had to push that sucker back up there again, and it may be true of his pushing ability, but I wrote a letter to Colonel Jose to thank him on our behalf that said, we think he's more Hercules than he is Sisyphus, because Hercules got some stuff done, and we can add this display as the 13th labor of Hercules. So our thanks to you, Doc, and you know how much we appreciate him. It's our second opportunity to get together to do something with an EC-47. Back in 2005, we dedicated the aircraft out front, and many of the same people were involved in that. You can't think of the EC-47 again without J.C. Wheeler back there, and Larry Ross and Ed Bentinelli, and just so many involved in the whole process. But what's cool today is there are 4 sons here today. Paul Clever and his wife and family, Ray Leftwich Jr. and Kitty, and our chaplain, You know, his dad was the front end crew. They drove the bus. You know, and then our son Tom Jr. and his wife are here. So we really appreciate the fact that these young men come and share almost on the 40th anniversary of the last mission that was flown in 1974. So we appreciate all you guys for showing the interest, and we're awful proud of each and every one of you. We had once we dedicated that EC, I thought something might still be missing, because you can walk by that aircraft and not know why is it really here. You know, I never flew out of here. It was just something we trained to do on the inside. And the Heritage Chapter, JJ and Ed and the guys had ideas about, let's open it up and put some mock equipment in there, and let's show some movies, and it sounds good until you can't find any equipment, and then you start thinking about West Texas in August and climbing inside that airplane at 104 on the outside. Never got any traction. Good ideas all. Until we had a young son go to Laos with his wife and bring back some artifacts. And he got together with a kindred spirit, Danny Russell, and it came to Goodfellow to ask, is there a place that we can find a display case to put these things that Paul and Nita brought back? Well, maybe. And so, again, Sisyphus and I went to work, and come to find out there was going to be a lot more space available if we could put a really good package together. So some of those earlier thoughts started to blossom, and that idea grew into what we have here today. But there was a spark, and because of that, we've dedicated that central display case in there to Cap 72, and that's why it's in the middle, and that's a focal point on this particular display. So I'm going to fast forward. I'm going to check some notes, put my eyes on. That started in December 2012. By March of 2013, Danny and Joe and I and others had put together a package and came up and talked to Colonel Tom Smith, the vice commander of the wing. And with Doc's coaching, we made a presentation that received overwhelming support. And we haven't looked back since that day. I got together with my brothers. I've got just 7 brothers and 3 sisters, and besides my service, Kenny served in the Air Force, Denny was in the Army, Larry was in the Army, Bob was in the Navy. So we do have some, and we come from a family of servers. My dad has 9 boys in his family, and 6 of them were in World War II together. So there's some continuity there. It shouldn't be surprised that the Nuri boys, and so I capitalized on that, and I said, all right, put your money where your mouth is, and we'll pay for this thing. And they did. So by October, we had money in the bank to finish this entire project. My younger brother, Cleet, is here with his wife, Gail, and it's as much to see the display as to check on how well we spent their dang money. And I said, Cleet, you better go home and tell them we did okay, because it's all gone, buddy. We spent it all. During all of that, this guy right over here, Joe Morton, we enticed him to come on board. So, Joe, we need some help. He's the go-to. He's the guru. He's been researching ARDF for longer than even he can remember. And he's a fact checker. He knows the terminology. He was very involved in researching the Army as they started the process and how that continued on. So he said, okay, Joe, will you help? And he said, sure. And very quickly, we established a really cool working relationship. He's Master Po, and I'm Grasshopper from the old Kung Fu 1970 series. Yes, sir, Master Po. And it has worked well. And we've become friends in that as well. So, Master Po, hats off to you. Okay. On the end panel down there where the flight suits or where the uniforms are, we've included the last name Morton on that flight suit. That's not his. But everything on there refers directly to Joe Morton, and it's our way of recognizing him and saying thank you for all of the help. Without you, we wouldn't have had this display as well. So thanks, Master Poe. Okay, on the end of the display right on this end and on the back of your program. So if you have one, please just take a moment to check the back of your program. And that's the list of names of the major players. And we didn't have to pay or do anything for these folks to come on board and support. They just said, whenever I said, what can we do? They said, just put my name on the back of something. So there's many, many websites that we had to get permission to not only view, but to download and to use, to get permission to use articles and documents and photos. And all of those names on the back of there reflect those authorizations. I can point out, you heard the introductions of the ones that are there. I introduced my son, Tom Nuri, but he served also as our editor. He works at ASU, and he knows AP style, and thought I wasn't too old to learn it. And so we went through, and so all of this has gone through Tom Nuri's work, and probably during that he wandered down the world I ever graduated from St. John's High School, but there it is. Thanks, son. JC, and I wasn't as kind to JC as I should have. I put him down here as a maintenance guy. That's from an operator's mentality. If you're not operations, you're maintenance. But he's a flight engineer. So if you want to be absolutely correct, take your program and cross out maintenance and put in flight engineer. And JC, I owe you. J.J. Graham, president of the local chapter, always ready to help and step up. Gabe Marshall's here, but Joe's going to take his name in vain, so I'm not going to touch that. But thank you for coming up from San Antonio, and again, for my brothers for stepping up. But I came back from a reunion in February, and as we talked to many of the families from the 94th, and we were talking all this ARDF jargon, and I saw some of the spouses' eyes just gloss over and say, here we go again. So I'm going to give you a quick 2-minute primer on ARDF. It's quite simple. You've all done it. You've all seen it done. The most vivid example I can give you is think in your mind when we used to have rabbit ears on a TV set. For those of you old enough to remember that. You had to take that rabbit ear, you had to turn that sucker, you had to wrap tin foil. You had to do all kinds of things to get that thing oriented right, to get that signal. Well, once you did that, you didn't know that, but you were actually pointing directly at the strongest part of that signal. You were doing some direction finding. As we get into more modern equipment, the commercial I love best is the guy walking around. Can you hear me now? Right? He's trying to find a signal. He's trying to communicate. All right, here we go. Dick Myers has got a little portable TV set, and he's got a set of rabbit ears, and he put a compass on them. And he's downtown trying to find KLST Tower. So he turns them rabbit ears, and he turns with them until he gets the best signal on that TV set that he can get. And he reads his compass, and he's got a line of bearing. J.C. Wheeler's in another part of town. He's got a little TV set with a compass on it, and he's going to do the same thing. Now, it's going to take him a bit longer because he's a flight engineer, but sooner or later, he's going to get lined up. He's going to get lined up with that antenna over there. And then J.J. Graham has got one, and he's going to line his up. And he's an analyst, and it's going to take all damn day before he gets it. But by the time they get done, there's going to be 3 intersecting lines, and where they intersect is where that antenna is located. And that, my friends, is direction finding. Now, you put them TV sets in them operators in an airplane, and you do the same thing, and you get ARDF. That's what these guys did. They were well trained. They were well led. And look at that guide on, they were well decorated. And we're going to celebrate some more of their history today. Thank you for this opportunity. You can pull my notes away.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. That was great. Great stuff. Nice history, nice lesson there for DF. We can use down in the schoolhouse here. The 1 and 5s can need some help down there. So, our next speaker is Master Poe. I have his name is Joe Morton, but we'll call him Master Poe now. He's the go-to guy for Army and Air Force ARDF information. Joe is an active trainer for the Vietnamese ARDF operators, so he got a unique look at their operations and their work ethics over there in Vietnam. His knowledge of the ARDF mission and his research skills were critical to the success of today's project. Without him, this wouldn't have happened, as we just said before. So, without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Joe Morton.
Thank you, JJ, and ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to try to put the brief back in briefing. No, didn't mean that like it sounded. Yeah, come on now. Anyway, it's indeed a pleasure and a privilege for me to be here today. It's a pleasure because of meeting you guys, and some of which I knew back in the day, but most of which I've met in years past. But it's a privilege to represent in some small way the 6994 Security Squadron, and by all rights, the name on that flight suit ought to be Nuri. So, Tom and Cleet, raise your hand back there so people know who you are. And without those guys, none of this would be here. So, thanks to the Nuri family, and good work all. As well as 20 linear feet can do it, this thing tells a really good story of the 6994th and the EC-47. But as the late Paul Harvey used to say, I'm going to try to give you a little bit of the rest of the story. Now, let me start with Lou. Where are you, Lou? Did Lou leave us? Okay, there he is, way in the back. Lou did a lot of work. You talk about Sisyphus and Pussyfoot and all this stuff. Lou did a really good job on these monitors, and I urge you to take the time to go through those monitors. You can walk up and down the fuselage here and see all you need to see, but take the time to go through those monitors. And Lou did the work on that. We gave him the raw material, and he turned it into something fit to look at. So you can push those buttons. If you don't like what you see, push another one. And you don't have to stand there and wait for it to go through. It's up to you to look at what you want, but it's well worth the time. And even though we've picked on JC once already, I'm going to pick on him again a little bit. Back in 1997 or so, Samuel Adams and I were trolling the internet one night, and I put in EC-47, and up came this brand new website. And to make a long story short, I hope, in 1998, I think it was, JC, we had a reunion down in San Antonio with all the front end, back end, anybody who could show up, and it kind of went from there. So if you want to go back to square one, and I don't mean to say JC's a square, but that's square one right back there in the back. So thank you, JC, for all that. Let me give you throw out just a few numbers that aren't shown here to give you some idea maybe of the magnitude of this of the operation. First of all, I looked at the 17 names on the panel there, and 11 of those 17 were under 25 years of age. Joe Matichov was just 3 years past his 21st birthday when he was shot down in Baron 5-2. Although John Ryan was 43, I think, and he'd already put in 24 years of service. So we did have the old heads in there too. But the young troops, or at least we were young then, but we did a lot of flying. How much is kind of hard to say because in some cases the data doesn't agree. It's foggy. And you can't tell the difference between an ARDF mission and a functional check flight or what have you. But if you look at which I did, look at the Air Force Statistical Digest from 66 through 72, which as far as I've managed to plunge through that stuff, got about 75,000 sorties. That's a lot of sorties. And about 240,000 flying hours. It doesn't take much of an extrapolation to know that the guys in the back end put in something over 1 million man-hours of direct support, direct tactical SIGINT support to the people on the ground. So we did a lot of work over those 8 years. Let me see. Oh, one other thing before Tom alluded to this, but I'll mention it again. That Finney flight panel was the Finney flight for the USAF. It was not the Finney flight for the EC-47. We turned 33 birds over to the Vietnamese Air Force, the VNAF, and they flew them until the roof caved in 1975. They lost at least one aircraft to hostile fire, and the only guy that I'm aware of that successfully, even though he doesn't realize it, bailed out of an EC-47. One guy survived. BC got him and took him to Hanoi, but he lived to tell the tale. The rest of them were killed in action. I knew personally a couple of those guys really well, one of which served more than 10 years in a re-education camp. So they paid their price. One other guy that I worked with quite closely, Don Van Gee, was a master sergeant at the time. Saw him in 2004 with a couple of other guys, and I went back to Vietnam and tooled around a bit. Had a beer with Gee. Due to a long, sorry story of the INS, he can't get into this country, but he spent more than 5 years in re-education camps. So, again, the Vietnamese paid their price. I'm going to tell you one more little thing about, I hope, what we've got left to do here. And that's tell, again, the rest of the story. And some of it we know, a lot we do. There's some we don't. But a couple of months ago, a guy in Australia, retired brigadier in Australia, Australian Defence Forces, who spent his career in Intel, wrote to our webmaster, 94th webmaster, Rick Ye, and asked, can you give me some information on a particular time frame? Well, we said, no, we can't. But Rick got busy with Ed and some other guys, and Gabe Marshall re-entered the story at this point, because Gabe led us to some pictures, one of which, as far as I'm concerned, was the Holy Grail, which is the ex-consul, picture of the ex-consul. So a lot of stuff came from San Antonio, and thanks to Gabe, it's up here now. But Gabe also got a little bit of one of our squadron histories declassified, enough to answer Ernie Chamberlain's question. And as it turned out, we knew this for many years. There was fixes that had been passed down from somebody to the Australians. And as their official history puts it, these fixes were like a string of beads pointing towards their base at Nui Dot. And Ernie wondered, well, could it have been you guys? Well, the unclassified portion we got pretty much confirmed that, yes, indeed, we did pass those fixes down to the Australians. Unfortunately, they didn't pay much heed to it because their patrols couldn't find any evidence of the contact. But the outfit was the 275th VC Regiment of the 5th VC Division. And they wound up being in the Battle of Long Tan not long after that, which is the iconic day in the Australian history of the Vietnam War, celebrated as their Vietnam Vets Day today. So the 94th had a direct linkage in that. And later on, Gabe got us a whole 30 pages of that 3 or 4 or 6 months history. And out of that, we're able to piece together now a lot of direct linkage between some Army operation, and they all had names, as you well know if you've studied any sort of history. And now we can connect. The 94th had X number of fixes that we passed in direct support of this mission, so it's a good thing. Thank you for that, Gabe, and you've cracked the door open, but go ahead and kick it down. We need that stuff while we're still alive to do something about it, so do what you can for us. To close this thing, I can't think of a better phrase than the phrase that's in all the Army histories of World War II, and it says, to those who served. So to those who served, to those who continue to serve, and to those who will serve in the future, let us dedicate this thing as a source of information and pride and heritage to the people going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate those good words. Would Colonel Joe's Chief Nuri and Joe please come up front for the official exhibit presentation?
commemorate today. That's going to go on the end of the council right here, and it says ARDF Operations Exhibit, Ribbon Cutting Ceremony and Presentation to the men and women of Goodfellow Air Force Base, 25 July 2014. Got the Colonel's name and my name on that. So on behalf of all of us here, Colonel Joseph, if you'll take that and fix it, we appreciate you. Oh, okay, great.
So much. Thank you so much.
There you go. You're quite welcome. Thank you.
Colonel Joseph, floor.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm gonna add to that.
Say a few words first. Say a
We're
few words
talked
first.
about. I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm moved to almost tears today. This is after spending 2 years at Misawa and walking through Gott Hall and Clever Hall and my going away barbecue was at Leftwich Park. I drove to work every day on Reese Road. You know, we had a sad moment when I was there when we had to tear down the original ops building, 1555, which was renamed well before I got there, but probably well after some of y'all who might have served there left, Matajoy Hall. And so you know, every day, everywhere I turned, I was reminded of this amazing mission and the people who did it. And of course, the neat thing about this and why it's so much better than just that awesome looking airplane out front is because this shows you a little bit of the technology, and the mission is partly about the technology, but when you look at the way this display's been set up, it becomes what it should be focused on, which is the people. And so, and this is a big deal, and I'm just really honored to be a part of this. So I do have some prepared remarks. I got to tell you, like I said, it's just I'm overwhelmed right now. This is good stuff. But first of all, Chief Nuri, thank you so much to you and your entire family for really being the creative, you know, impetus behind this. Obviously, the financial impetus behind this. But back to the person. Thank you for your service and your love of this mission and wanting to keep this real for all of us who've come after you. It's huge. Ladies and gentlemen, your presence here is what makes this ribbon cutting so special. I just cannot get over how this, I mean, and I wish I could take every airman that's on this base that is following in your footsteps and tell them you couldn't have walked through the inside of this airplane back in the day, right? And while they might think this looks kind of, you know, old and outmoded from what we know today, I mean, this was it. This was the cutting edge, and it's just so neat to make it look like the cutout of the inside with the aircraft itself sitting right outside the door. It's perfect. And so back to why I am so excited that it's here at Goodfellow. This could have been put several places that would have been just as appropriate. There are a lot of places that I think are special in the hearts of our security service personnel who are out there. But why I love it being at Goodfellow is because every week, you need to know that myself and my command chief, we get a bus on Monday morning, and Monday about noon, I guess, of the airmen right out of basic training. And they've just graduated. They're being called airmen for the first time in their lives, and they've been chosen to come to Goodfellow and start on this thing called an Air Force career, and they have no idea what they're getting into. and I walk in and I talk to them, every one of them on Tuesday for their first day of in-processing. And I start my words out with this. You walk in the footsteps of giants. And you're the giants. So having this here is something that helps me and my chief make this a little more real to those airmen. And that's why I think it is right to have it at Goodfellow, and it's awesome to have it at Goodfellow, and I'm so happy it's here. So, and I'm kind of paraphrasing. I had this awesome speech written, but like I said, you guys got me all choked up. All right. So a little bit that we didn't really talk about. So Goodfellow, what role did it play? And this is pretty neat. And this is, by the way, still what we consider to be our sacred trust today. You had an evolving mission initially. You had a mission that needed people that were trained on it. And where are you going to do that training when the majority of your assets are in a combat zone? The more you put the burden of training onto the combat forces, the more danger that you put people in, the harder it becomes to do, the more distracting it is from the primary mission as you're trying to execute it in the middle of a war. And so Goodfellow stepped up and said, we can take some of this and cut the training time down the minute they hit the ground in the combat AOR. And that is it's a small role, but it's critical. And so that's why this is so important, to stitch that long blue line of airmen all the way back to this great training base that I'm so privileged to command right now. Some folks even said that the training that we did here at Goodfellow cut the required training time in half once folks hit the ground, and made them that much closer to combat readiness that much quicker. And when you talk about this emerging technology as it was at the time and its criticality, a lot of people talk about game-changing technology. But you've got folks that knew. Not everybody knew, right, because of how special and how sensitive it was. But I offer up a quote from Lieutenant General William Momyer. He specifically said, ARDF provided the primary and basic source of intelligence in Vietnam. It doesn't get any more clear than that. That's probably about all he could say. But that says what it needs to right there. And so what about these folks that were out on these missions alone, unarmed and unafraid? The MORSOPs, the linguists, the analysts, the maintainers, the flight engineers. Courageous, you bet. Right in the heart of the envelope for a lot of ground fire. You went where you needed to go to get the mission done. And then your mission's done, and you can't even talk about, in a lot of cases, your role in the success and the impact that you had. J.C. Wheeler's website, amazing at starting to get at that and telling that story in such a rich way. And so on that website, there's an article that was written recently by Colonel Robert Cameron, who is a navigator who flew 127 ARDF missions. And he begins by noting that the nav was the one guy in the front-end crew who could actually get on interplane and talk to the crews in the back, because he was the only one cleared to hear potentially sensitive conversations that were going on. And he said the signals intelligence technicians were a different breed, but we know that already, don't we? We thought of them as soldiers of fortune. They lived off base but did not communicate very much with us except to do the job. They showed up for the mission, flew it, went to their own debriefing, and left. They were all senior sergeants and had been stationed all over the world. They knew several foreign languages and could decipher the dots and dashes of several languages. They could even identify the signature of different operators by the rhythm of the signals that they sent with their keys. So I just, I wish I could be there on a mission and just be looking over the shoulders and listening to what I know was the witty banter going on by the crew, with this confidence of these amazing young men who knew they were in danger, who knew they were the best at what they did, and went out for their nation and did it. And it's a small token that we can host this year, but it's our honor to be able to demonstrate to everybody who's gonna keep this nation safe and do the business that you were doing in such a critical time in our nation's history, and make sure that this memory stays real and stays current and we know where we came from. And so I'm just so honored to be here. So in terms of thanks, again, thank you, Chief. Thank you to you and your family. Mr. and Mrs. Clever, Mr. Danny Russell, who unfortunately could not be with us today, and the recovery efforts in Laos is huge for the demonstrations or the displays we have here. Joe, thank you again for your countless hours of research. And then to everybody else, I know I'm missing some folks. And on behalf of literally the thousands of students we have walking around this space every day, and hey, we got a Starbucks right here in the morning. It's packed. They're going to walk right past us. We did this on purpose. We are going to be the beneficiaries of this for years and years to come. And finally, to all of the men in attendance today who were a part of that mission, and to all the families who are here, and for those who are not here to celebrate with us, I am so very honored to be in your presence today, and you've made this dedication so very special. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Colonel Jos, will you, Chief Nuri, Mr. Martin, and Mr. Kalidas Nuri, please prepare to cut the ribbon?
That's a big scissor.
Yes, it is.
You're going to do the honors. Absolutely.
You and I hold up this and let those guys look at it.
That's right. Pull it.
To your right. Joe, grab the ribbon and pull it apart. Right there, right there.
Hey!